EM Weekly starting right now, bringing emergency managers from around the world together to learn, share and collaborate.
Good morning, or good afternoon, depending on where you are at in this fine nation. And today we're talking about public-private partnerships. I have to say that slow because it's like a really tongue twister. But before we get into it, let's bring Dan onto the show. Dan.
Hey, good morning. How's it going, my friend?
It's going good, man. How was your Thanksgiving? I didn't see you last week because of vacation or whatnot. How things going?
Thanksgiving was quiet. We didn't do much. We didn't travel. We didn't go see family. Family didn't come see us. It was literally just us in the house. So it was nice and quiet, and yeah, we just kind of just vegged out a little bit, which was great. It was well deserved on my part.
Yeah, no kidding. I think that's what we all sort of need. Oh man. So hey, we're gonna talk about private public partnerships, P3. I know it's kind of like a big thing, but I was thinking about this last night when I knew we're gonna bring Jackie on here in a second. But when I knew we were bringing Jackie on, and I was thinking about we've probably been really doing private public partnerships forever, right? I mean, I don't think this is anything that's like super, new. I know, we think things are great and new, and like say last 10, 15 years or whatever. But I mean, I was thinking back to the railroads, all this kind of stuff. It's always sort of been that way, hasn't it?
Well, I mean, it's always been around, but it not necessarily always been pursued. And then you have even though it may be in conjunction, it's been around and you've had it going on. Not everybody knew what was going on and know what they were. Ultimately now it's more the outreach and as I've said multiple times, and you're probably going to get tired of me hearing me say it. It's letting others know what it is, why it's important, how they can help. And what's available to them, what resources and that's why I'm glad that we're having the show today.
Well, you know what, Jackie, why don't you come on in? So we got Jackie Koci Tamayo here. So she is an expert here in the private-public partnerships. She's put a lot of work into it, and so when Jackie said she wanted to talk to me about this, I was like, heck yeah! Plus, I like her, so there's that too. Jackie, welcome to EM Weekly.
Hi, Dan and Todd. Thank you for inviting me and talking about P3 because I can't do it either. Very difficult phrase.
Before we get into P3, and it's actually sort of a public-private partnership. Oh, I said that right. You have something coming up pretty shortly here, starting January, I think, right? It's a podcast as well.
Yes. So IAEM Region 9 will be having their own podcast right here. Not right here with EM Weekly, but right here on the Stitch Network or radio. And it will be your co-directors of public affairs, so myself and Isamar Garcia. And we are going to bring to you every topic that you need in regards to Region 9 IAEM. So anything from P3, if it's a part of it, to health. And we're just going to highlight and showcase the region and bringing more tools to our tool belt so we could be really ready as emergency managers. So we're looking forward to it. So thank you for letting me put that on the air.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it too. So I'm excited that you are taking on that role, and it's going to be a lot of fun, and it's going to be a great way to communicate with everybody. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about P3. How did you get involved with looking at the private-public partnerships?
Well, I got involved even before becoming an emergency manager in I call it my past life, when I was a recreation professional with the City of Los Angeles Recreation and Parks. And during the time, it was the recession, about 2008, we were noticing that we can't do programming as usual. And it was always about the whole community approach, right? We have to work with our neighbors, other parks, other people, and just noticing that not only working with public relationships, like with your council offices and mayors, was imperative, but the community also included the small businesses, the churches, the local AYSO, different groups, even the civilians. So that relationship started building within that career. And then when I became part of the mass care coalition for the city of LA, it really came handy when it comes to sheltering and evacs and doing LACs. and knowing that you as a city or you as an entity can't do it alone. And I say this because the city of Los Angeles itself is a 4.6 million population. And making sure to do that, you can't rely on the city and its entities alone. So, and a lot of people, honestly, a lot of business owners, a lot of CEOs, a lot of pastors, whoever is in the lead of our partnerships, they want to help. They want to help their Angelinos. So from there, when I went in, I started working with the Business Operations Center for LA City, and really developed that program, especially during COVID, which got hit hard. And now in my new role in judicial emergency management, take that one. We don't call it P3 per se, we call it judicial partners. Same exact concept, but for a different type of emergency management. So my role has always been fostering and creating those leads to really help mitigate and recover from disasters or emergencies, but also at time of response and doing the communication. And we found it's imperative because they're your eyes and ears as well as your soldiers during the time. Yeah.
When it comes to emergency management in general, and I'm going to apply it to emergency management, even though it could be applied in so many different realms. And I want to use my words very deliberately here. When it comes to public-partner relationship and building the collaboration, what I find anyway is that the jurisdiction or the organization or whatever it is that we're going with don't capitalize on the resources that are available to them. I mean, we train this with emergency management with ICS, right? When you're doing something in your organization, when you put somebody in logistics, you don't want to take somebody from someone that doesn't do logistics, right? You want to put someone who does logistics and put them in logistics. You want someone in operation, put them in operation. So when it comes to public partner relationships and building that up, we don't find a lot of those jurisdictions that capitalize on the skills that are out in the jurisdiction or the organization. It could be a simple organizational structure. Right. So with your experience, how do you feel that public partner relationships would build on not only the jurisdiction, but the profession?
Don't forget to add the private in there, Dan.
The P3.
P3.
So I think how we capitalize is many times we think, our VOAD, we're very strong with VOADs, that our VOAD is our P3. And I want to say this with a lot of respect because they are amazing. And yes, they're part of the relationship. But when we talk about P3, it's really the industry people, right? Like when we're talking about is like our large companies, small business, chamber, veterinarians, if that's something that's around in your area. And I think what it is the fact that we understand it. We put it kind of like a liaison approach when we talk about the ICS system. But it's moreover to really develop it into its own system and having a dedicated EM professional overseeing the growth of it. So it's not only during the response, not when you're converting it into an emergency, but really fostering that. Start with your chamber. I think that's one of the bigger areas because they know what's going on. And start with if you're even a small town, because I know everybody's like, oh, I can't do this. I'm not a big city or EM. No, in your small towns, in your small jurisdictions, it's easy because it's that neighborhood grassroots program with certain organizations. So plan it out as if you are doing an annex to something else. Have a ConOps, have what is your concept of operation when it comes to the PP3? It is not something like, hi, I'm Jackie. I want to work with you. Great, Jackie. I want to work with you too, but how can we work? Oh, I didn't get that far. Let me get back to you. No, it's really like, this is what we want to do, build that. And in EM, it's really hard because we are always thinking, well, we know this is imperative, but how do we build it into our plans? And you build it in because they're your stakeholders. They're part of your jurisdiction, whether it's your hospital or a city or Meta or Amazon. It doesn't matter. It's reciprocal, because at the end of the day, we're all in the same ship trying to navigate these waters during the emergency. And in blue sky days, as we say it, that's when we start this planning, not when something hits. So Dan, in a redundant way, is plan for it as if it's part of your EOP. Make sure it's part of your annex. It's part of what you do. A lot of us are stretched thin right now, and I understand it's an extra load. But in my past experience in these last 2 years, if it wasn't for the P3, things could have been a little different or a little tougher for our jurisdictions. And I'm experiencing it both in judicial and local city. So I'm very grateful for the relationships that we've had.
So Meta, artist formerly known as Facebook, they're out there doing their thing, and it's if you take a look at communication specifically, and that's why I kind of brought the Meta thing, is we have always had to partner with a private business, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's AT&T or Verizon or mass notification systems like I do over Titan HST, we have to work with these organizations because, I mean, IPAWS, a great government, concept with WIA, but they also need to have the delivery device, and that's when you bring in those private partners to do that stuff. So yeah, I think it's critical to be looking at those partnerships. And the other thing too is, I don't know why, but the press as of late has kind of made it sound like having that private public partnership is kind of like dirty, right? Like scammy or whatever. But it isn't, right? Because you're right. It isn't just the big businesses. It's not the federal government, having contracts with Raytheon, for instance, which is a huge contract for them, building satellites and whatever else they're doing. But it's also, local government having contracts with, Dan's sub shop down the street to make sandwiches during disasters. Brian, this producer Brian and I, we were going to lunch one day during the wildland fires that we had in Irvine, and one of the local businesses that were there was closed to other business because you look inside there, they're working their butt off. They're creating boxed lunches to send out to all the people that were working, and they just shut their doors to regular walk-in business because that's how busy they were. So I think when we take a look at that concept of the private public partnership, P3, it's not just those big companies, right? It's also mom and pop shops in your neighborhood. So you're right. Even if you are in a small town, there are people who you can partner with to do things. Dan, what do you think of that?
Oh, I 100% agree. But that leads to another comment that I wanted to make, and more of a question on how we can fix it. Is you mentioned the blue sky analogy, and you got the blue sky, gray sky, and what I find though is that a lot of those relationships or partnerships are formed during gray sky, and they don't continue in blue sky to lead to the next gray sky, right? Yep. So it's literally, and we talk about this a lot. How we go from disaster to disaster, or emergency to emergency, or crisis to crisis, depending on your evaluation of the situation. And we're not necessarily the consistency is not there when it comes to our partnerships, right? So absolutely. How do we in this? So that leads me to the question on your, and this could be opinionated really, on how do we build in that consistency so that when we're not in gray sky, we are making in the blue sky, we are building stronger for the next gray sky.
Right. I think it's more like kind of the team building approach that you use during the blue sky, because you're right. There were some people that I never considered as partners until gray sky hits hit, and you're like, oh my, you should have been here when we were planning, trying to lift this up. Or if you're like planning a business operations center, that's a huge blue sky concept that we could go into more in a moment. But while we're building that, bring them in, do like an advisory board with people who represent the sectors, and keep them involved. Like always, when you're re-looking at your concepts of your P3, have them at the table. Have some fun with the social media and doing workshops with them throughout the Blue Sky. So there's a group that is really great that I've had a pleasure to work with, and it's a free group, is Outsmart Disaster. And they worked with our agency in providing tips about business resiliency and nonprofit resiliency and all of it that hit the sectors. And you work with that because you're maintaining that relationship. So as you are kind of quote unquote taking sometimes during the response, during Blue Sky Day, you're giving to help with them, because if you need them as we need our EMs during a response, we have to make sure we're all prepared, right? I don't want to go back to that concept, but we're always prepared. So we need to make sure our small businesses are resilient, our leaders in the community are resilient, and having those avenues, whether it's from another nonprofit or ourselves, and continue that interaction and really build. It doesn't have to be every day. It doesn't have to be every week, but at least like maybe a monthly check-in with a quick newsletter or social media interaction, or like I said, a couple of fun trainings that brings the P3s together and that build that networking and development, because they're going to tell you what resources they have and how you can interact with even within them. Because who knows, maybe the small business that's down the street or the chamber has resources that consumer affairs had no clue, and vice versa. And those connections is what EM's all about. We are the glue of public safety. We are the connectors. And that's what we're about, is connecting the dots for people. So I think that's it. Just continue interaction during Blue Sky Days that develops the resiliency of the business organization.
I think Robichaud just brings up the idea that it's not only developing private-public partnerships, but also private-private partnerships.
Yes.
And so she says an example is a boutique ice cream store developing a partnership with a restaurant in another part of town, that if the power goes out, the ice cream store can be the restaurant's freezer. And that's a really good point, of developing that and building those relationships. And I think you're right about EM being the glue. Hey, we got to take a quick break. And when we come back, let's discuss more about this private-private partnership and how emergency management can facilitate it. Hey, everybody. I know that things are going really fast. We're in the holiday season here, but we do have a couple of great things coming up next week. We have a special episode coming out on Wednesday of next week, and it is my interview with FEMA Administrator Criswell. It was a great conversation. I'm excited to share this with you. So it's going to be live, or we're going to broadcast it on December 12th, same time. So hopefully, or December 15th, I mean, same time. So hopefully that you guys can be there for that and share that. And it's going to be, I think you guys are going to love it. Also, next week on the 16th, we have a special urban search and rescue episode that we're going to be doing. And Joe Hernandez, he actually was on the pile at the collapse in a bunch of different collapses for that matter, but the big one with the condominium collapse over in Miami. And so I think that's going to be a great conversation as well. And then also on the 16th, we have our webinar with Disaster Tech. And Disaster Tech, excuse me, Disaster Tech's going to be talking about their Voltron. And Dan, come in for a second.
What's up?
We're going to have the webinar next week, and we're going to be able to get to take a deeper look at Voltron. Is it worth going to that webinar?
You don't want to miss it. I mean, to see this thing in action. I mean, as an emergency manager, this is like the game. If you're a gamer in any way, even if you're not, gamification is definitely going to change emergency management and how we prepare. And knowing what we can do with Voltron is going to change how we prepare, how we train, how we exercise our plans, how we potentially even write our plans, and doing so in a way that keeps the engagement. That's the hardest part we find, right? Is keeping people engaged, keeping people wanting to do it. With gamification, it allows you to broach a new arena for training, and it's definitely going to be something you don't want to miss.
I have never been so impressed with a training software program. That's just the training software. You can use it. This program, I'm just like blown away by it. It's a conjunction between disaster tech.
When I saw it in action, I was like, it's one of those things you don't get excited very much about something that's like going to help you do your job better, right? And this is something I got excited about. Like, this is definitely, it helped me do my job better, but it's more for the, how we engage not only our community but our organization, right? And and I think it's you don't get excited much when it comes to emergency management, right? Another thing, this is cool.
I sent Sean Griffin, the CEO of Disaster Tech, an email the other day saying, how can I get more involved in this? Because I'm just like I'm so nerdy about this, but we're talking way too much about Voltron. You got to come on the 16th and be part of this webinar, because you're going to be bummed out if you don't come. All right. I will also have the login information, or the ability to sign up in there. Also, you can always check us out at the EM Weekly on LinkedIn or on Facebook to get more information on how to register for that webinar. Let's bring Jackie back in.
Oh my God. As a gamer, I am so there.
Yeah, you got to be there. Jack, you're gonna love it. It's a system. It blew my mind when we were taking a look at it at the. It's like one of those things. You go to this presentation, you're like, okay, I'm going to the presentation because it's kind of cool. And all of a sudden you go there, like, holy smoke! Why didn't I know about this earlier? This is just amazing. So how do you really, like, when you're looking at making that first step into doing that private public partnership, or any partnerships for that matter, what's your suggestion to the guy, the emergency manager who is so used to sitting in the closet typing freaking away at the keyboard, writing plans or whatever they do all day long, right? And they go, oh, I have to go out and talk to people. Like, what's the best approach, the best practice to approach, say, like the Chamber of Commerce, to start building those relationships?
Definitely, I would say start small and build and work your way up. So if you are in a jurisdiction, or when you're running your plans, you're working with other agencies immediately, whether it's your, municipal water, your gas, you're starting there, because it's, as mentioned, we do private, but it's also public, right? Start there and start easy way, because you're still working within your own village. You're learning how to network a little bit more. You're able to, kind of, if you stumble a little bit because you're new into developing relationships, it's easier there because it'll help pick you up a little bit more. And then start going into more of your, when you're going to departments, go into more of that public facing departments, because those public facing departments, like your Parks and Recreation, or even law, if they have a community police advisory board, or your LAFD CERT, they have connections. They start knowing. So you could go into there and present at meetings, talk to meetings, let them know who you are, not necessarily having to be the pro or knocking on the door kind of a approach. Some of the organizations and private public will then open the door, and you could speak to the chamber. So with the chamber, they do have a liaison for government. For government, they have liaisons, but they also have liaisons for any private industry who wants to come in and try to get your seat at the table, not necessarily to speak, but just to listen. And before you even start the whole entire approach, do a needs assessment of your agency and know what you're looking for. You don't want to go to every entity, every group, not because you're being rude, but because you need to really know it's like your thyra. What's your thyra of your agency? What you're assessing your risks, right? But when you're assessing those risks, what needs are there, and what do you have available, and what do you need to get? And that's how you can kind of start picking. And it just naturally flows. It just keeps going. So I do not recommend you right now, unless you have the connection, beating down, Smart and Final or something immediately, unless you have your game plan prepared and you feel confident enough in yourself. Because sometimes it is a little bit of a confidence, but it's not hard at all. Just to go out there. And cold calls during gray sky can sometimes work because the need is there. But when you're doing it in blue sky day, just really be prepared in the game plan and that reciprocal agreement between the privates, the publics, and then public, private, and your nonprofits.
I mean, I liked your assertion that you start small. I mean, ultimately, starting small is a good place, and to kind of quote Simon Sinek, start small, but start now. I mean, don't wait until you get ready and you do all this long. Start, just start. By making things happen, and you made a comment there too, and so did Todd about the emergency manager that's sitting in their office just typing away at their key. A real emergency manager does not sit in their office all day. So so what's your encouragement or even advice for the emergency manager who currently sits in their office to actually take that small step to get outside their comfort zone and start engaging?
This is going to sound funny to you. I will say start with an association that is relatable to emergency management or public safety. Weird, right? Like, you're like, but that's my field. I know people. But they know people. And then their people know people. So if your county has like an emergency management association within your county, there's a few that's up here in Northern California that has it. Start there because those connections will start. If you are behind your desk and not on Zoom calls like this or with your counties, you're missing the beat. You're missing opportunity. You're missing mitigation opportunities. That's what it is. You're missing that. So you can start there with go into a VOAD. That's it. It's just experience about talking to people and getting them and starting that ball rolling. Because they know, and it's that little web that comes through. So for the emergency manager who has the deadline to create or create a plan or to revisit their earthquake annex or whatnot, take an hour once a month and go to an association. Telling you it will build that relationship. CISA in California or your state associations and anywhere, they are great too. And get to know your Cal OES liaison or your state OES liaison for private public. They're a huge asset. They will steer you. Big shout out to ours in California, Abby Browning. Thank you. It's a relationship that just naturally progresses, but it's because you started small within your associations, within your VOAD, within your CERT. Don't forget CERT, because CERT does have.
Oh, CERT's amazing.
They do.
I actually had a CERT member when I was at a local jurisdiction, and she owned Baskin Robbins, and she owned 2 Baskin Robbins, and we had this. It was an event that were in the EOC from 0 dark 30. Literally, I think we started at 12 a.m. And worked. It was a 24-hour event type thing that occurred, and she showed up with these, just out of the blue. She shows up with these frozen coffee drinks for the entire EOC that didn't ask for it. She's one of our CERT volunteers, and it was one of those things. Everybody was just like, "Whoa!" Even if people that weren't even interested in drinking this stuff, they were just so impressed with the fact that here comes somebody from out of their own pocket, didn't ask for anything, brought these things, and it's just having that relationship where during the other blue sky days, if you will, that she was one of our teammates and she stepped up. So those people will step up. That's the one thing that I think about when we look at the disasters and the events that we've gone through. People step up, and we have to realize that it's always great to have that relationship beforehand. Again, Eileen pops in with the idea of going and talking to the Chamber of Commerce, but one of the things that I did is I was, when I was at the local jurisdiction, I joined the local Lions Club because that was the big club in our city. So I became a line. I spoke at the Rotary, spoke at the Kiwanis, went to all those rubber chicken dinners, those things to talk to people, to say, hey, look, we're part of you guys are part of the community. We're part of you. Right. Yeah. And really being involved and really being involved with the community. And I think that's the key, right? Is that as emergency managers, as Dan was saying, a real emergency manager doesn't stay in their office. Get out there and really be involved with the community and be an asset for the community more than just writing plans.
Absolutely. And what's more important is many of our own community members do not know emergency management exists. They don't understand that it's a sad truth. We know exist. I mean, hello FEMA,
Right.
but our jurisdictions, even our private sector, has different titles for emergency management with things that we do. So if we do ask to present, I would say our first presentation should always be, hi, I'm Jackie Koci Tamayo, emergency service corner, emergency manager, whatever, for such and such jurisdiction. And I want to share to you and present how emergency management works with you guys, and make it about your association, because many people think of disaster response just fire and law.
Right.
And then if it's any civilian, it's your city administration, your mayor, your governor, whatnot. And really bring in and hone in what emergency management is in that area, in that local jurisdiction, and make them understand you're the connectors, you're the coordinators, you're the glue. I always will say this, guys, so please forgive me if I keep repeating that we are the glue for the incident and the response, and help with the preparation. And we try to mitigate these factors. Explain those things to them, and then they'll like, oh, and I'll tell you, that's what we did with the Chamber of Commerce, and explain what we really do. And that's how we started our relationship, because we did put our foot in the door, but saying, we have an emergency management program. Let me tell you what it's about. And then we went from there.
Absolutely.
And it's fascinating to tell you, in both large cities and smaller cities, that most people don't know what it is. They think it's a part of the fire service or part of the law, because, a historic tradition, it's nothing wrong with knowing what you know. But they don't realize that there's emergency management, but either within those services or its own department and office. So start with what you know and what you do, and it will flourish. But don't just think you present it and that's end game. There is follow-up and there is relationship development. Just because you did your presentation, it doesn't mean you can just leave and be like, peace out, I'll call you when we need you. You just can't do that, guys. Sorry.
Let's get a quick comment on that. Then I'll turn it over, because we're coming to the end. But I have a quick comment on that for emergency managers out there. Me, I'd been an experienced emergency manager with, at the time I had 10 years under my belt as an emergency manager, and I went into an organization, and even within fire and PD, there are misconceptions and complete. They don't know what it is. So until you actually let them know what it is, how they can help, how they can get involved, what they can do to contribute. And they want to get involved when they find out what it is. They really do, but they don't necessarily have a complete understanding. So even if you, as an emergency manager, a professional emergency manager, sitting there in an organization, your counterparts, your people you work with, they may not know what it is you do, how they can contribute. By just letting them know what it is you do and how they can contribute, you just gained an ally. You gained a partner. And so step up in that realm too. Don't just look outside of your organization. Look inside your organization as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because they'll know you speak the same language. Because they'll know you speak the same language.
Yeah.
Well, Jackie, it's been great having you on today. We got to get going here. We're at the hard stop. I'll stick around. We'll talk in a minute, but we got to wrap it up here. Dan, it's always a pleasure seeing you. Looking forward to more of this. And hey, everybody else. Hey, thank you so much for spending time with us today here at EM Weekly. And today you can see that I have my Navy hat on, and there's a couple reasons why I have it on there. But this was the 80th anniversary of December 7th, right? Pearl Harbor Day. 80 years ago it's an amazing thing. So please remember Pearl Harbor Day this week, and the veterans that are still alive for Pearl that served that day. Everybody else, thank you so much for your time today, spending time with us. And as always, stay safe and stay hydrated.